The Surrounded by D'Arcy McNickle. Chapter 25. In town later that evening, as he came out of a restaurant, our child met Elise LaRose. He would have continued on his way, but she took his arm. "I was looking for you. Take me to the dance." He was puzzled. "The dance is over." "Oh, hell, not the Indian dance. That makes me sick. I mean the regular dance at the hall." He had no desire to go there. He had been on his way home. He said so. "Well, have a good time. And look, I turned down two fellows already. I was waiting for you. So you gotta be a sport now. You ain't got a girl already?" No, he didn't have a girl. In the pale light her upturned face held his gaze, and he could not turn from it. He consented. He had come to town in the blue automobile, and now he led her to it. It was not far away. She was dressed in white and made a sparkling figure in the moonlight. He had not been avoiding Elise, but neither had he gone after his handkerchief. He had not even thought of it. He wasn't afraid of her, he told himself. But now that she had a hold of him, he was feeling the way he felt just before climbing into the saddle on a bucking horse. Something was going to happen. "What made you wait for me?" He wanted to ask why in hell she hadn't left him alone. The car started and she rolled against him. She looked at his unsmiling face and laughed. "I don't like those scissor bills around here." Her explanation got no response from him. The dance had already begun in Farmer's Hall. Stepping in out of darkness, the glaring lights struck one's eyes. Men were gathered around the doorway, and talk and cigarette smoke blew about their heads. The benches around the dancing floor were taken up by the women, those who had come to dance and those who were too fat and old, who merely came to look on and wag their tongues. Our child did not want to meet people. He still bore the sense of guilt which had come alive that afternoon. He looked carefully for Dave Quigley, and finally, when satisfied that the sheriff was not present, he moved with less constraint. But even without that worry, he did not take easily to the dance. Something about it repelled him. He frowned and held himself aloof. Elise felt it and became irritated. "What's the matter? If you don't like it, I guess there's plenty of fellows around." That fiddler, listen to him. The idea came to him suddenly. The music rasped his nerves. It was useless to explain. Elise listened, but it sounded all right. Nobody minded. The people who glided by were undisturbed. He was surprised by what they neither saw nor heard. They had come to talk and push each other around the room, and they required nothing. Bare gray walls, glaring lights, rasping music, none of those things hindered. The Indians, at least, when they went to dance, were reliving an old way of life, and they tried to put themselves in the right mood. They dressed themselves in ways that had special significance, and there were symbols and gestures of various meanings. But for these people there was nothing, as he could see by looking at them. "Ah, hell, enjoy yourself," Elise was protesting. "You're a swell dancer. Let yourself go." She pressed closer until he could feel her thighs moving against his. He leaned backward from the waist and teased him. His arm tightened. He danced nimbly, whirling through the simple, meaningless steps without effort. By the time they had gone through several dances, he began to smile a little and let himself go, as Elise had urged. Sheriff Quigley was not there. He could let him slip out of his mind. The music seemed to grow less harsh. Before long, Elise wanted something to drink. "This dance needs a kick. Let's go find something." He knew that Max had left a stock of liquor at home, much whiskey, some brandy, and a few bottles of wine, but he said nothing about it. Liquor was prohibited on the reservation, and he had no idea where people got the stuff. It was sold freely by certain runners, but he had no idea where to find them. Elise knew all about it. She knew everything about matters of that sort. Just as at school she had known to fool the matrons, how to get cigarettes, and how to sneak out of the dormitory. Some people To some people nothing is ever hidden, and they live by habit in a world beneath the surface of things which most people never suspect even exists. Elise was such a person. She amazed our child. They drove along the stage road leading out of St. Xavier. They turned into a side road. He recognized an abandoned ranch, which he probably drove past several times a week. The log cabin was back some distance from the road and partly hidden by a cottonwood grove. There was no light in the window, but several automobiles made shadowy patches off to one side. It was not deserted. He had switched off his lights as they approached. Elise gave him directions. "Tell Bernie, he's the guy you'll meet. Tell him you want white mule. The other stuff ain't no good, but the white mule he makes himself. If he asks who sent you, tell him I'm waiting here." When he returned with the bottle, they drove off. Before they reached the main road, she had him slow down and showed him an opening in the brush patch where they had been skirting. There was no mistaking her knowledge of the vicinity. They drank out of the bottle. It was scorching stuff. They smoked and had another drink. Our child felt himself relax. Dave Quigley was quite gone from his mind. For the first time, too, he quit scheming at the back of his head for an excuse to get away. It was something new for him, this drinking with a girl, and he was unnaturally casual about it. He did not want to act excited and make himself ridiculous. Elise was watching his face in the pale light. Suddenly, she began to laugh. "You're a hell of a funny fellow sitting there." She leaned against him and ran her hand under his jaw. "What's the matter? Want another drink?" He did not push her away exactly, but in reaching for the bottle, he did get away. At that she laughed again. "Sure. Never turn down a drink. That's me." She laughed every time she looked at him. "You better have a couple drinks." She was showing him other tricks, catching his hand and pressing it against her soft breast, pulling his ear and biting him. "Don't think I mean anything against you. See, the scissor bills around this town really make you sick. Some of them have the sif. You have to know who they are and stay clear. You watch out if you go around any girls. Say I like you." She pulled his head down to her and kissed him. Our child floundered. He wasn't going to be casual much longer. Already his hands were finding her body. "Have a drink," he cried out and took his hands away. "Let's go back and dance." Elise laughed. It was a swell game for her. Elise continued to enjoy herself. She held him at close quarters and yielded to every movement. She watched him, always smiling. A certain fire of recklessness appeared in his eyes. She coaxed it. She heard his faster breathing and felt his arm tighten at her waist. It was all very gay. She laughed a good deal. They had both taken to laughing. It wasn't that they said anything humorous, for they spoke very little and neither was a successful storyteller. In their mood they needed no more than a wink or a sly pressure of leg against leg to set them shaking with laughter. It was certainly strong liquor they had taken, but it was nothing compared to the intoxication they caught from each other. Their laughter grew louder. People had been staring at them for some time now. The old woman on the side lines scarcely looked at any other couple. Their eyes followed them all the way around the room, and they moved their heads from side to side and leaned from their seats as they tried to see around the dancers who got in the way. Those on the floor had also begun to take notice them and moved to one side as they passed. Our child and Elise were so unheeding of everything but the heat which passed between their bodies that they saw no one, and in self-protection the other dancers had to keep out of their way. Some of them giggled, others looked pained. The whispers went around the room. "It's Leon boy. Look, he's been drinking and he's after one of those LaRose sluts." They were There were lamentations among the old women that his father hadn't been buried 6 months. The money wouldn't last much longer. "He's just getting started on it. Wait till he gets going good." Whenever an Indian had money to spend, the talk was always the same. How long would it last? Finally, some of the older women began to get excited. "Somebody's got to stop it, or I'll take my girls home. The idea!" It was just about then that Elise had her mouth turned upward to our child's ear. She was whispering something, and he bent down quickly and kissed her on the lips. There was a gasp that could have been heard out in the street, but our child didn't hear. Elise had begun to look around, and she saw the manager, a heavy-set, middle-aged man, come toward them. Our child paid no attention to the tap on his shoulder. Elise said something and gave him a slight shake. He only tightened his clasp. The thick-set man grabbed him roughly and pulled him half free of Elise. Our child frowned slightly, and what he did next was quite unexpected. He seemed to keep his eyes on Elise all the time, but his aim was perfect. He freed his arm from her waist and in the same motion swung it to one side and upward. He caught the heavy-set man on the chin and with such stunning effect that he went down without moving an arm. Then hell broke loose. Men jumped him from all sides. The women left the benches and were running about crazily, looking for their dancing daughters and calling for their men to take them home. Our child came to his senses about then and realized that something had happened. His arms were pinned behind and men pressed in upon him. Somebody just in front drew back his fist to hit him in the face, but the blow wasn't delivered. Our child caught him in the stomach with his foot and sent him hurling against the other men, and several went down in a heap. That lunge almost freed him, but his captors pressed back quickly. "Don't hit him, boys," someone commanded. "Wait till we get him outside." At that our child struggled desperately, but they bore him down. He was pressed forward to the door. The scuffle lasted for several minutes before they could get him outside. Clothes were torn, breaths came in gasps. They cursed and tore his fingers from the door. "Now!" the same voice commanded. He was struck from behind with something harder than a fist, and at the same instant his arms were freed. He shot forward off the step and landed in a loose heap in the dusty road. It was a minute before Elise, fighting and swearing, her own clothes torn as men had held her from wading into the group around our child, could get to him. Then she stood in the road and wished them all in vitriolic hell. She drove our child home, but she could never explain how she got him into the car.